Hi, this is Steve Adubato. Welcome to Think Tank, the podcast. Compelling, important, relevant conversations on the audio side. You can check out all of our work on the broadcast side as well. But I'm joined in the studio by three of our terrific team members. One is Nicole Swenerton, the senior producer of Think Tank, the broadcast. Mary Gamba, our longtime colleague who leads our organization day to day. And Michaela Batts, who is associate producer at the Caucus Educational Corporation. Let's do this. We are going to get into a very important conversation we just had with Kevin Richardson, a member of the, quote, Exonerated Five, formerly known as the Central Park Five, and a colleague of his who was talking about people who are wrongfully accused in the United States and how DNA and other related evidence helps those who are wrongly convicted not be, and rectifying that situation. But real quick, Nicole, tell folks how they can find all of our past stuff.
Of course. So to hear more Think Tank podcasts, you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Google Play, or you can visit our website at steveadubato.org. That's Adubato. And you can follow us on Twitter at Steve Adubato and on Facebook at Steve Adubato PhD to check out all our content. Here's
the deal. In 1989, literally 30 years ago as we do this program, a horrific event happened in Central Park, New York City. A young woman by the name of Tricia Miley, who in fact we interviewed before any of you were with us. We actually sat down with Tricia Miley, who was the Central Park jogger. She never remembered what happened to her. She was attacked by someone, a group of people, or one person no one knew. It was a horrific incident, tons of publicity in New York City. There was tremendous pressure to find out who did what to this young woman from Connecticut. These four young men, who in fact Kevin Richardson was one of them, were brought in for questioning. Antron McCray, Yusuf Salam, Raymond Santana, and Corey Wise, along with Kevin Richardson. They were known as the Central Park Five. No DNA evidence. The DNA evidence did not match. Some of them may not have even been in the park that night. There was pressure to convict them, to make the trial happen, convict them. Donald Trump, then a private citizen, put out ads in the tabloids in New York that called for the death penalty for these teenagers before the trial even happened. Several years later, a gentleman by the name of Mateus Reyes admitted that he was the one who raped Tricia Miley and brutalized her. His DNA matched. Except the Central Park Five, Michaela, had been in jail for a long time before that. Their lives, their adolescence, destroyed. A powerful story. Do you sometimes look at this and go, how did that ever happen?
Of course. I don't understand how they just forced them to go into jail for something that they know they didn't do. They told them, say this is...
They said one of your other colleagues said that you were in on it, and then the kid's like, huh? We weren't there. Well, they told us if you don't tell us, he'll get out and you won't. And
exactly.
They coerced a confession.
Right, exactly. And then they all sit in this room and almost confessed to each other that they lied to themselves, lied on each other, saying that we're all innocent, but they said that if we do this, like, everything will be perfectly fine. And it's raw, it's uncomfortable, it's not pretty, but it's real, and something that the public needs to know about as we keep looking into this case.
What do we think it took away from their lives, Nicole? By the way, Rikers. They were in Rikers Island as young men, boys.
It's so sad. And I think one of my biggest takeaways from the interview that you conducted with Kevin Richardson is he was 14 years old. That's a child. And thinking about
my son is 14. I can't even comprehend what
thinking
we're talking
about the 7 years that he spent in prison. I mean, you think about all of those things that happen in those ages of your life. Going to prom, get your license, going to college. I mean, you missed out on all of these formative years of his life. And people say, oh, you got a huge settlement. Well, no.
They got a $41 million settlement from the city of New York.
It's never enough.
Took his adolescence away.
It did.
Destroyed his life.
Sad.
And Mary, you're tough on crime. You're a law and order person.
Absolutely.
In this case, is that law and order?
It's not. And I was actually the same age as Kevin when this happened.
No kidding.
Yeah. And, that's why when
because he's 46-ish.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, he's probably 45.
45. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
That's
but
freaky.
You're making me age quicker than I want to age,
he
Steve.
was 14,
Thank you.
not 16. One of them was 16.
Oh, yeah,
he was 14.
No, he was 14.
Got it.
And
Thank you.
in 89, I was 14. But it was striking at the time. I remember feeling vulnerable myself at that time, being a young woman living in New Jersey, obviously, exercising, running, being outside and around in the parks after dark. So I felt for her, but then at the same time, I was enraged and angered at these young men because they made us think they did it. And
the prosecutors, the police, the government, hey, we got to find somebody.
Yep.
We got to nail somebody because we have to make people feel safe in Central Park. Let's get these four kids.
Yeah.
They look like they could be criminals. Huh? Why? Because of their race? Because where they lived? Michaela, you happen to be, I'm looking around, you're the only African-American in the room. Genius analysis here. Do you think it affects you any differently than it affects any one of us?
Honestly, yes, because I see someone on the screen that looks like me. And that's just something that not everyone can relate to. So for all of the minorities in the country looking at this and saying, oh my gosh, how could they do this? Well, it's like, what's stopping them from doing it to other minorities?
You think it could happen again?
Absolutely.
You do?
I think it's still happening. And the only difference is that now we have social media and the media to look into it and really put it out there. So, like, they need to watch out.
By the way, this is clear. We say this all the time. This is not cop bashing. This is not bashing against the criminal justice system for the sake of it. It is asking for justice. It is asking for fairness. It is asking for due process. And by the way, Donald Trump, who put out those ads that said, kill, death penalty for all these kids before the trial, even when we found out it wasn't them, he absolutely, categorically never apologized. He refused to, as if his version of reality was accurate, even though someone else with the DNA matched what happened. So here's the thing. We sat down with Kevin Richardson, a member of the Exonerated Five, formerly the Central Park Five, and a woman by the name of Vanessa Potkin with the Innocence Project. This is a powerful, compelling, and actually quite disturbing podcast, Think Tank the podcast, that should cause you, I hope, we always say this on the air with Think Tank, you just listen and watch, but in the end, you got to think for yourself. Check out Think Tank the podcast. We are honored to welcome Mr. Kevin Richardson, member of the Exonerated Five, and Vanessa Potkin, Director of Post-Conviction Litigation at the Innocence Project. I want to thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Kevin, part of the Exonerated Five, back in April 19th, 1989, the Central Park Five, you were one of those young men. Were you 14?
14 years old, correct.
All 14 except one was 16.
Two was 14, myself and Raymond Santana. We were the two youngest. And two were 15, and Corey was the oldest.
So I was telling you before we got on the air here that I was watching a Netflix special. And by the way, the show that people should watch, the series is When They See Us, is a 4-part miniseries on Netflix. Check it out. But I was watching Oprah Winfrey interview you and your brothers, talking about that experience. And it was a powerful one. But I'm going to ask you, what is the most important message for people to understand that you and your colleagues, you and your friends spent a lot of time in jail? Your innocence was taken away. 14, 15, 16 years of age. How many years did you serve?
I served 7 years in prison.
Where?
I started off in the juvenile facility because I was 16 when I actually went into prison. Then I got transferred as an adult to the adult prison at 21. Then I did the last 3 years there. So it was all everywhere, actually.
I want people to understand this. There were a lot of people at the time in '89, including our president, Donald Trump, who was a private citizen at the time. He took out a full-page ad. Newspapers in New York. He called for the death penalty for all five. I want everyone to understand that in 2002, DNA evidence confirmed that someone else who actually acknowledged that it was him who raped Tricia Miley in 1989 in Central Park, correct?
That's right. A man came forward, Mateus Reyes, and he said that he, started to tell people, I did this crime, I did it alone, and DNA testing was performed and confirmed that his DNA was on multiple items at the crime scene, and he had a history of committing similar crimes all by himself in the area around the time, including a rape that happened just days before in Central Park.
What about the DNA evidence of Kevin and those other young men? Did it match?
So at the time of the crime, the DNA didn't match, and law enforcement knew this, but this just shows the power of confessions, right? These young men were interrogated, ultimately, falsely confessed to the crime.
How much pressure were they under to confess?
Well, these were 14, 15, and 16-year-olds, right? And, what people don't realize is that it's perfectly legal in the United States to lie, for the police to lie when they're interrogating a suspect. And so they can make you believe, if you just tell us what we need to know, you can go home. They say, as they did here, your friend is saying that you did it. And if you don't say something now, you're going to go to prison forever. And so they can lie and intimidate and people come to believe it's in their best interest to just say what they want, what the police want them to say, and end the interrogation, and it'll all sort itself out later. But it doesn't.
Sorry for interrupting. I hate to bring you back there, but I saw you talk to Oprah about this. Do you remember the interrogation? It was 30 years ago. Do you remember it?
Yeah, some things you never forget. You know, I just remember the process. Being 14, not knowing what will happen, not knowing if I will come out of the prison, out of the precinct alive. You know, at that age, you're just concerned about just being home, back with your family, and to be there under 3 days of interrogation without food, without water, without proper attention from your parents. It's something that's very devastating. And not only does, like, adults go through this as well, but just imagine someone that's 14, 15, and 16. It's still horrific. It's still horrific to think about it.
You were charged. There was a court case, and Oprah again asked you when you heard guilty, 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 guilty. What's happening for you?
When I heard guilty, I remember I was charged with 13 counts. After the first count, I started to phase out, you know, felt like I was gonna pass out because I just heard guilty, guilty, one by one, 13 times. And I just thought to myself, like, why is this happening? Like, it was, you know, it was clear that we were not guilty. But at that time, at 14, I didn't understand why it was happening.
Was the prosecutor driving this?
Well, I think it was law enforcement, it was police, it was prosecutors. You know, really the prosecutor has an obligation. You know, there were huge discrepancies in the statements, right, with the known facts of the crime. And anybody who took a step back and said, hey, let's really, you know, suss this out. Let's put this to the test. This isn't making sense here, right? Each person is, you know, giving a statement implicating the other, and they're all conflicting with each other. But there was
How were they convicted?
Well, there was a real thirst to solve the crime. And at the end of the day, it's very hard for people to understand that false confessions occur. And so once there's a confession in a case, it all but equates with a guilty verdict, even in the face of exculpatory DNA, right? So it took for the DNA to be matched to the true assailant for them to be ultimately exonerated.
But in the meantime, what was taken away from you?
What was taken away from me is my youth, being able to grow, not knowing what will happen, you know, and when I get older. One goal I always had, I wanted to attend Syracuse University. I was very into that. During that time, I was a Big East guy from New York, you know, so I followed the basketball team, and I always just wanted to go to that school. Was Derek Coleman the man
at the time?
Yes, he was.
I thought so.
Derek Coleman, Billy Owens.
I got it.
It goes on.
I hear you.
So I've been a fan since
Jimmy Boeheim
then.
was there at the time. He was there forever. But
Yes, he was. You know.
Go ahead.
So, but there's things like that, and also the basic things that we don't think about, like missing my prom. I wasn't able to fulfill being a kid. You know, I had to grow up fast in the institution.
One of the things about this documentary, or this miniseries on Netflix that struck me, and I've only watched part of it, and I'll make sure that I watch all of it, but I was listening to you and your colleagues, you and your brothers, and you are brothers.
Yes, we're brothers.
For life.
Yes.
You all had different experiences.
Yes.
Tortured in different ways, suffered in different ways.
Yeah.
What keeps you together?
What keeps us together is that we went through this together, and we started as strangers, and then now we're brothers, because if anybody knows, we know exactly what happened to us. I mean, now the world knows because of the series when they see us, but we have that bond going through that, and to still be here 30 years later, to still be relevant, to still have our life story being untold to the world, is something that's very gratifying.
You said, by the way, I said it was a documentary. It's a mini-series, not a documentary. I'm going to clarify something on that. But you said in that special I saw on Netflix, it's painful, but?
It's painful, but it's very necessary.
Because?
Because especially today in this society, people need to be awake, and we need to raise awareness about people that's still being incarcerated that's not guilty. And there's many, the number goes on, there's people that's still innocent. So all we wanted was to have our life story told, and it exceeded what we wanted. and now we just have to keep it alive and keep raising awareness.
Devil's advocate, someone says, you know, these guys got a settlement from the city of New York, $40 million. Yeah, they got to split it between, amongst all of them. There are legal fees, but they got $40 million. Come on, you say.
Who would trade a day of their life to be in a maximum security prison, to be separated from their family, to be, you know, prisons are dehumanizing places.
And knowing you did not do it.
Knowing you didn't do it. That there's no way to ever take away the suffering, the torture. Those psychological scars will always be there.
By the way, stay right there. Corey Wise, one of the 5 of the Exonerated Five, solitary confinement. How long?
For years.
Free.
For years. And, you know, compensation doesn't make people who are wrongfully convicted whole. It's necessary, but you can never undo that experience. You can never, you know, compensate somebody or really give them back everything that they lost.
Who's apologized? Who hasn't? City of New York apologized?
No.
Prosecutor's office?
No.
Police?
No.
Courts?
No.
President Donald Trump?
Definitely not.
What would you say to him if you could talk to him face to face?
You know,
I want to be clear. Donald Trump, look it up. This isn't anyone's opinion. Took out full-page ads in the tabloids in New York and other papers calling for the death penalty for these 5 young men who ultimately were found not to have committed this crime that someone else did. Called for the death penalty. Never apologized. What would you say to him?
You know, at this point, I don't think it's much more, anything he was to really say much to him, just to basically, you see the truth. We would have loved and apologized back then, but now we're moved on with our life, and now we don't even pay attention to, we're trying to.
Some of your colleagues, some of your brothers, at least my interpretation, have not moved on.
No, it's hard. Like I said, each day we strive to. Each day is a process. And that's why I want to go back really quick about the settlement.
40 million.
You know, people have this misconception that we all receive 41 million each or something like that. Now, when you break it up 5 different ways with lawyer fees, family, it doesn't amount to too much. Now, we are definitely able to take care of our family, and I'm happy to do that as a man, to take care of my kids, but that does not take away the time that happened to us. We will easily trade that in. We can't get back those years that we lost, those years that's precious.
Vanessa, what is the message that we should all, in your opinion, take from this, particularly with the work you and your colleagues are doing at the Innocence Project?
Well, we know that wrongful convictions occur. 2,471 people have been proven innocent since 1989. The types of evidence that are routinely used to convict people, including confession evidence, can be extraordinarily unreliable. Just looking at the DNA exonerations alone, we've had 365 throughout the country, and around 30% of those people falsely confessed, right? So made admissions to crimes they were completely innocent of. And so we have to take the information that we know about the criminal justice system, about evidence that's used to convict, and use it to implement change. We're really archaic now in terms of, you know, what we're not in tune with what the social science and, you know, what we know about the types of evidence that are being used to convict people. And we have to just take a step back. You know, we have a system of mass incarceration.
How much of it is racially motivated?
Well, I
In
think,
your opinion?
I think if you look at the basis of the criminal justice system, it is a system that disproportionately targets and impacts and incarcerates people of color.
Were they targeted? Were these 5 young men targeted?
Well, they were targeted. You know, there's this whole notion of, you know, that they were in the park wilding, and there's no denying that, you know, racism played a huge role in their wrongful conviction, and even how they're treated today. You know, people are more outraged that Linda Fairstein is finally the prosecutor of the case.
Linda Fairstein, did she recently resign?
So she was, you know, on the board of Vassar. She was, you know, she went on to write books, and
she drove this case.
She drove
and she
the
had
case.
the evidence that the DNA did not match, and she never, forget about apologize, unless I'm wrong on this, she never said, hold on, time out, we got the wrong guys.
Never. And after their exoneration, she's never apologized. She's never officially acknowledged their innocence. And
Never.
And she, Vassar recently, asked her to resign from the Board of Trustees. And people are more outraged over this tiny consequence that she's facing today than what happened
Kevin, I'm
to
at 30 seconds. I'm sorry for
Exonerated
interrupting.
Five.
Message to all of us. Give it to us.
The message is never judge a book by its cover. We were kids that just was raised with our parents, raised in a nice background, but we were judged because the color of our skin, and not by how we are. So I just want to just keep raising awareness to people and see our life story, and now you see us.
On Netflix.
On Netflix.
And they see you now. I want to thank you, Kevin, and most importantly, wish you and your family nothing but good health and a good life. Wish you the best. And Vanessa, thank you for adding perspective as well.
Thank you.
One-on-One with Steve Adubato has been a production of the Caucus Educational Corporation, celebrating over 30 years of broadcast excellence. Funding for this edition of One-on-One with Steve Adubato has been provided by NJIT, RWJ Barnabas Health, the Northward Center, PSC&G, the law firm of Gibbons PC, New Jersey Resources, and by TD Bank. Promotional support provided by New Jersey Globe and by New Jersey Monthly. Transportation provided by Airbrook Limousine, serving the metropolitan New York, New Jersey area.
I think at NJIT there are a lot of smart students.
I came to NJIT for mechanical engineering because within state, it's one of probably the top 3 schools for engineering.
It sort of creates a friendly competition where you can learn from them.
It's a great academic school.
I feel I'm being challenged, but at the same time, I love the classes I'm taking.
The atmosphere of being here is like being at an upstart company. It's that same kind of drive, that same kind of passion.